Hi, I'm Amy Smollers, CEO of Strategic Market Insight, and welcome to week 3 of 7 things every person should master. This week's topic is flexible thinking and use of evidence, and it follows week 1, which was reading, and week 2, which is inquiry. So as I'll get to later, it's a natural progression from reading to inquiry to flexible thinking and use of evidence. But before I get into more details, I'd like to share a quote with you from a book I'm currently reading. That's The Entrepreneur Solution by Mel H. Abram. And his quote is as follows. I'm just going to read it here. Be expansive in your thinking so you can continually gauge which of the many roads opening before you to go down next. And I love this quote because I really feel as if it embodies this week's topic of flexible thinking and use of evidence. So the first part of be expansive in your thinking, there's an implication that you're being flexible if you have to be expansive and consider the different options before you. And in continually gauging, which is the second part of that quote, it's applying or assuming that you're using evidence or different pieces of evidence or information from different sources to make a decision. And you're not just following a path that you're either told to take or a path you think is what you're supposed to take because everyone else is doing it, or a path of which you just don't feel that you can make a choice or a decision and just follow it. And one of the reasons I bring this up and think that this is a really important topic and part of the 7 things every person should master is the book Thinking Fast and Slow, which I've mentioned from the reading and also as part of inquiry. The premise of the book is so interesting because it's saying your brain has 2 systems, a system 1 and a system 2. One of them thinks really fast and just makes decisions subconsciously or unconsciously. The other system you have to expend more energy to use to make a decision. Now, what's interesting is people often think that they're being conscious and intentional in their decisions, but oftentimes what those decisions are, they're subconscious. Well, this is just the way we should do it. Let's just go down this path because, well, we have to do it that way. But you think you're consciously weighing all different areas of evidence and being flexible in your thinking to come to that decision. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think, as I've talked about before, it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. And to master the idea of being flexible in your thinking and using evidence, it takes practice to train your brain to not necessarily always make that quick decision, but sometimes take a step back and say, is this really the right decision to make? Why am I making this decision? Now, a simple example of this, and I think many of you have had the same situation. So I was at dinner the other night with some old friends and some new acquaintances, and I was super excited to go to this restaurant because it was supposed to be a newer restaurant with some interesting menu, and we were having a great time, great conversation, and then the menu gets brought by the waiter, and for a second I looked at it and I got a little overwhelmed because there were so many things to look on of the menu. And for a second, my fast system in my brain said, hey, will you please just make a decision? This is taking too much time and I'm getting tired, right? But the system 2 part of my brain was saying, okay, well, Amy, you were thinking earlier that for dinner, you wanted to try to at least have some sort of salad product because you've been in a conference for 3 days and you should have a salad in between everything else that you're doing. You also thought earlier you might want to have some vegetables and maybe some sort of meat or chicken. So let's take a look at the menu and see what's there. And if everything's there, great. If not, let's think about what you can mix or match, with an appetizer or a main dish. Now, again, it's not a crucial decision or there's not a lot weighing on it because the menu was awesome. So I wasn't going to make a bad decision. But it was the idea that my brain got mentally tired and I had to force it to say, don't make a quick decision. Think about what you really want to eat. Now imagine if you did that in more choices that you're making. If you're having a challenge or you're trying to figure out something with your child at home, instead of doing the automatic quick decision, maybe you can step back and think for a moment about the situation. Be flexible. Well, what's the child feeling? What are you feeling? And what's around you where you can help to use information or evidence around you to see what's going on before you jump to a conclusion. That's easy to do. So You may be thinking, what the heck does going to dinner and talking to your kid about to do with flexible thinking and use of evidence? Well, I think a lot. And I actually, in going over this topic and working on it for a long time, I really think there's 5 reasons why we need to be flexible in our thinking and use evidence that are practical that you can actually use in your daily life. Now, number 1 is the easy one because it actually follows naturally from reading and inquiry to flexible thinking and use of evidence. Because the more you read, the more inquisitive you become, and the more likely you are to be flexible in your thinking because you've asked questions, and use evidence because you've done reading and you've kind of taught and trained yourself to ask questions, then that naturally falls to using evidence. So there's a natural progression and almost a method to my madness, if you will, for these 7 things every person should master. The second thing is the real world shouldn't rely on memorization and regurgitation. We really have to set an example for ourselves, our kids, our community, and our businesses to enable the creative thinking process to come back into play. And I'll talk about that in a moment of why that actually can have economic implications on our society and on ourselves as well. Number 3 is if you do this, the flexible thinking, and force yourself to use evidence and take that step back, you're actually strengthening your brain. So you're doing yourself a service by training yourself to not always just take something on face value or just do the easy way out. And oftentimes when you take the step back, don't go the easy way out and train yourself to do that, the results are a lot better than they would have been otherwise. But a part of this too, which is number 4, is when you discourage creative thinking, like I see in some businesses and I see in schools even, where I live in the state of Massachusetts in the United States, and we have a test that children have to take every year. And in some school districts or neighborhoods, the teachers are so concerned and they're held accountable for the test is that they only teach the test. So instead of an environment where, say there's a math problem put on the board and the kids work together to solve the problem, and they're not timed to say, can you solve this in 5 minutes? Can you solve this in a minute? There's the actual process that it takes to solve the answer. That's something that I think is undervalued in our society right now, to give people space to think and explore. And I'll give you one quick story of in my graduate courses that I teach, especially the ones where there's a number for an answer, like statistics or health economics. I always throw my graduate students for a loop because I say, I am not grading on the answer. I am grading on how you get that answer. So they have to write out the steps that they take to get to a solution. And they get so aggravated. They're like, well, I got it right. And I said, well, that's great, but can you replicate it? And how did you figure it out? What process did you use? And that helps them think out of the box and forces them to take time and to weigh different pieces of information to do the process. And I think that's something that's really missing in businesses and in schools. Too often it's just do this because we say to do this, and this is the way you should always do it, without figuring out, well, is there a different way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Or is there a new way to solve it? And I think that's missing. And where that comes in to be economically related is that a society that does not promote creative thinking, that doesn't promote innovation, can either plateau or decline economically. I mean, how are you going to improve an economy or take it steps above if you keep doing the same thing all the time, right? You lose that juice and try something new, and it's kind of sad when that happens. And I fear in 5, 10, 15 years, we're going to see more of that just because of the constant just testing and just do as you're told part. Number 5, the 5th reason I think that flexible thinking, use of evidence is crucial, is because when you're doing it, you are an active, alive, purposeful, and intentional individual. Like you're a participant in your life. You're not taking things on and saying, woe is me. I'm just driving along on the road I'm told to drive on and doing as I'm told. You're actually alive and thinking about things and being purposeful. And I think that is something we all owe ourselves, to do that. We all can do it and we're all capable of doing it, but it takes a little extra energy and a little extra purpose. So I hope you have enjoyed week 3 of the 7 things every person should master. I'd love to hear from you, and the comments you've been sending me and the emails I've been getting have been great from the first 2 weeks of this. I'd love to hear from you. Are you flexible in your thinking? What types of evidence do you use when you make decisions? How do you feel and think that this is useful in your own life? So don't forget to like and share this video and share with your friends. And until next week, I hope you have a great day. And don't forget, start every day with a smile.